We tried, but we hit a dead end. With these words, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio emphasized that the United States has acknowledged the failure of attempts to achieve peace between Russia and Ukraine. Marco Rubio stated that the U.S. no longer wishes to waste its time on empty negotiations, and that's why Donald Trump is simply walking away. At the same time, it is known that right now Ukraine's chief negotiator is in the United States. Rustem Umerov explained what he went to discuss with Donald Trump's special representative Stephen Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. Nevertheless, Zelensky unexpectedly states that even despite Marco Rubio's statement, he is still expecting Trump's representatives in Kyiv at the turn of spring and summer. Although it should be acknowledged the day before, the Russians officially announced that they are withdrawing from the negotiations because Ukraine does not want to give up Donbas. Right after that, Umerov flew to the United States. But as for the negotiations, it's already obvious that they are taking a new form. In particular, the European Union has stated that it is ready to take on this initiative. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps promote the content on YouTube. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So the head of the U.S. State Department, Marco Rubio, unexpectedly stated that the negotiations on Ukraine, in which the U.S. acted as a mediator, have ended. Next is a quote from Marco Rubio. "We tried to play the role of mediator, but so far this has not led to a fruitful result for a number of reasons. We are still ready to play this role if it can be effective. The United States no longer wants to waste time and energy on efforts that do not lead to progress. The Trump administration is ready to return to the negotiation process if circumstances change." And I would like to note here that earlier, the aide to the president of the Russian Federation, Yuri Ushakov, also stated that there is currently no point in another round of trilateral negotiations between Moscow, Washington, and Kyiv on Ukraine, since for further progress it is Kyiv that must withdraw its troops from Donbas. Next, I will quote Ushakov. "Everyone understands, including, I would say, the Ukrainian negotiators, that right now Kyiv needs to take just one serious step. After which, firstly, military actions will be suspended, and secondly, prospects will open up for a serious discussion of the possibilities for further long-term settlement. Everyone understands this, so right now, to be honest, convincing each other is largely a waste of time, because at this point this step is expected from Kyiv, specifically from Zelensky. No matter how much the Russians try to dodge the issue, it must be admitted the Kremlin disrupted these negotiations with help from Donald Trump. Although the US offered the Kremlin a generous deal, which included lifting sanctions, economic cooperation between the US and Russia, and even the possible recognition of Crimea as Russian, Vladimir Putin still refused to make concessions on the territories, demanding control over the entire Donbas, including areas his army had not captured and certainly will not capture in the near future. Despite numerous visits by American negotiators to the Kremlin and the red carpet rolled out for Vladimir Putin in Alaska, despite Donald Trump's promise to end the war in 24 hours, Donald Trump was only able to organize a few Russian-Ukrainian meetings, none of which led to peace. Back in early April, Bloomberg sources close to the Kremlin reported that Vladimir Putin was preparing to continue the war for another year or two, and he ordered the generals of the Russian General Staff to prepare a new offensive. The US was hoping to reach a peace deal by March, so that the deal could then be put to a nationwide referendum in Ukraine and elections could be held at the same time as the Kremlin demanded. And on top of that, Trump was in a hurry to organize all of this before the US elections in November. And against this backdrop, the question arises, why then did Rustem Umerov go to Miami? Let me remind you, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, went to the US to meet with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And as it turned out, the key topic of conversation was the humanitarian track, specifically the return of Ukrainian prisoners held by Russia. But that's what was announced publicly, while what happened behind closed doors is more interesting. After that, it was already Volodymyr Zelensky. Volodymyr, the president of Ukraine, stated that Ukraine is expecting a visit from representatives of US President Donald Trump to Kyiv in late spring or early summer. Let me remind you that Witkoff and Kushner were expected in Kyiv at the start of spring, but they never arrived. And according to Zelensky, this was allegedly agreed upon by Umarov and Witkoff. Here is a quote from the president of Ukraine. The negotiations are substantive. We are coordinating the schedule of necessary visits and expect representatives of the American president in Kyiv in late spring or early summer. We hope that this time we will be able to carry out what we've planned and step up diplomacy. We are finalizing the details of the agreements that can guarantee security. What matters is that the talks are constructive and we need to move toward peace by strengthening Ukraine and bilateral relations with the United States. Here, of course, the question arises, what exactly did Rostem Umarov actually discuss with Stephen Witkoff? Here's what that adds up to. The Russians say that they are withdrawing from the negotiations and Ukraine is not ready to give up Donbass. Marco Rubio, representing the Americans, says negotiations are deadlocked for the same reason. And suddenly Zelensky announces that Umarov held some substantive negotiations that will ensure security. And let me remind you that the Americans were only ready to provide us with security guarantees after signing a peace agreement, in other words, after surrendering Ukrainian Donbass. It's clear that we need to keep an eye on this and watch what happens next, because the negotiations have completely moved behind the scenes into backroom deals. But unexpectedly, it became known that the leaders of the European Union are preparing for possible negotiations with President Vladimir Putin of Russia after Trump suffered a defeat in his diplomacy. According to a Reuters report, the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, said that he sees potential for negotiations between the European Union and Putin, noting that the bloc has secured the support of the president of Ukraine. This means that Zelensky has approved such contacts, although he does not say so publicly. And here is the final touch for you. The press secretary of the president of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov, stated on Friday that Vladimir Putin is ready for negotiations with the European Union, but Russia will not initiate such contacts on its own. Here is a quote from Peskov. Vladimir Putin is ready for negotiations with everyone. He has said this repeatedly. The Russian side was not the initiator of reducing our relations with the EU to zero. The initiator of this was precisely Brussels and certain European capitals. We will be ready to move forward in our dialogue as much as the Europeans are ready. But as Putin has repeatedly said, after the position taken by the Europeans, we will not initiate such contacts ourselves. Well, let's watch where this negotiation track will turn. Friends, I'd like to make an important announcement for the Ukrainian-speaking viewers of this YouTube channel. Just today, I launched a new YouTube channel where I broadcast exclusively in Ukrainian. For now, I'm releasing a format of daily summaries, recaps of the day. At the end of each day, there will be one episode in Ukrainian where we'll sum up the day together, focusing of course on domestic Ukrainian issues and geopolitics, which one way or another affects what's happening in Ukraine. So, friends, those of you who speak Ukrainian who are watching me from Ukraine, I really urge you today to click the link in the pinned comment and go to my new YouTube channel. Of course, subscribe, watch the first episode, and write your comments. In general, support the new YouTube channel so that YouTube starts ranking it right away. And as many Ukrainian-speaking viewers as possible can see our episodes. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to this YouTube channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would of course be grateful to you for that. You can do this by making any donation using the links and details in the description of this video or by using the QR code on your screen. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.